I need my space. A blip on. All right, look. We've got ourselves some beef. We have got ourselves some beef, and it isn't just any old beef. It is Twitter beef. Twitter beef. And we all know how important Twitter beef is in this day and age. Stephen Espinoza. Now, a couple of you might not know who he is, so I'll briefly explain who Stephen Espinoza is and what he does. Stephen Espinoza is the head of boxing for Showtime. And what that basically means is he's a top boy at Showtime, and he's responsible for all of the boxing content that is produced and broadcast on Showtime's platforms. Part of his job is to make sure that he signs the best available fighters to deals to fight on Showtime rather than other channels. Previously, he was actually quite successful in his role, maybe about 5-10 years ago, when he had the likes of Floyd Mayweather on his platform. But things have changed around for him recently. And the reason why I'm talking about Stephen Espinoza is over the weekend, and maybe a couple of days before the weekend, he took it upon himself to start throwing shots at the UFC. And the reason why he was throwing shots at the UFC and Dana White is because it was brought to his attention that there was a clause in the contracts that the fighters signed in order to fight on Saturday night that he fundamentally disagreed with. And this clause was basically around a term. And this term is disparaging comments. The clause in the contract basically said that the fighters on that card were restricted from making disparaging comments about the UFC, and if they did make disparaging comments, they were liable for forfeiting a portion, if not all, of their fight purse. Now, what does that actually mean? So for me personally, when I read these tweets by Stephen Espinoza and I saw him going off on one, I had to check my pulse, I had to check my heart rate, because I thought to myself, hold on, has Stephen Espinoza actually just tweeted something that I fundamentally agree with? Has he just said something that me here now that I agree with? Because it doesn't happen very often. I'm not going to lie to you, it doesn't happen very often. So I carried on reading tweets because I know what the word disparaging means, and it just means, in fact, I've got the Oxford Dictionary open here, and the term disparagement is defined as the act of making unflattering statements against someone or something. Now, unflattering could be, another word for unflattering is criticizing. Do you know what I mean? So I thought to myself, hold on a minute, have the UFC made fighters sign contracts that means that they can't speak up against the UFC, especially in a time like this, where you'd want fighters to have the freedom to speak up against the UFC if the UFC are cutting corners and not doing the utmost to maintain the health and safety of the fighters and everyone else involved in UFC 249. So I'm so glad that a reporter asked Dana White about this in the post-fight press conference, because the tone of my video about this whole scenario would have been different, because it was on my list of things that I want to make a video about, and there's a couple of other things that I'm going to talk about today. And I'm actually, just a side note, I'm quite glad that UFC 249 has happened, because the last 2 or 3 weeks has been consumed by me talking about the event, and not just the fighters on the event or the fights on the card and the magnitude of the fights on the card. It's just actually been about the event. Will it happen? Won't it happen? If it does happen, where's it going to be? And if it's over there, who's going to oversee it? What state athletic commission has sanctioned this? You know, all of that kind of stuff, which just kind of makes me want to go, like, it's just annoying now, isn't it? And I'm kind of glad that the events happen. And at the moment, and I know it's very premature to say this, it feels like it has been a successful event, because Jacare and 2 people tested positive for coronavirus, and it seems like they're in good health and they're fine, and it seems like everything has gone smoothly. However, it is premature, and in 2 weeks' time, 90% of the people connected with that event could fall with coronavirus, and in that case, it will be a monumental disaster. But at this point, you can kind of tentatively say it's a success off of the information that we have to hand so far. And going back to my motivation for making this video, I was going to say, like, that's kind of out of order. Like, the fighters are already doing you a favor. When I say you, I'm talking about the UFC, by agreeing to perform on this card under the circumstances that we're in. And you're basically putting clauses in their contract to stop them even criticizing you guys if you make a mistake. So I'm glad that Dana White was asked about this, because if you go and watch Dana White's post-fight press conference, and I really, really, really encourage you guys to do that, because the way he reacted to being asked about Stephen Espinoza's comments about this clause in the contract, it tells you all you need to know. The way Dana White reacted and the way he explained what that clause means, he basically said, no, we don't stop our fighters from sharing their opinions. That clause stops fighters from saying false things about the UFC. So I thought to myself, hold on, let me Google this disparaging legal term. So now I'm gone onto this website called merriam-webster.com, and it's /legal/disparagement. And the legal definition of disparagement is the publication of false and injurious statements that are derogatory of another's property, business, or product. And then the light bulb went in my head. So disparaging, the legal terminology is different for the definition of that word when you use it in just normal day-to-day English language. I never thought I'd be talking about this on a YouTube video, but we are where we are. So effectively, the UFC have put a clause in contracts for fighters to say you can't lie about us, which is pretty fair if you really think about it. And then if you're to go one deeper, I just off the top of my head, I can remember Justin Gaethje making comments about the UFC and basically moaning and saying, well, the scariest part of this whole thing has been traveling on a plane to come here, and the UFC didn't provide us with private planes. And he was being negative towards the UFC. One could say he was being disparaging, obviously not in a legal terminology, because he wasn't making false claims. He was telling the truth, and he was being negative about the UFC, and he hasn't been reprimanded for that. To go one further, I literally made a video about Justin Gaethje a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, talking about how he's treading a fine line, a fine margin, because he actually came out and said that he's going to punch Dana White in the face if he doesn't get the fight that he believes he deserves. He's going to physically punch Dana White in the face. I made a video discussing that. Lo and behold, a couple of months down the line, Dana White gives Justin Gaethje a title shot for the interim belt. I know, but it's still a title shot. Do you know what I mean? So this is a prime target for Dana White to let his ego get in the way and say, nah, fuck that, I'm not giving him a shot. Do you know what you was just saying about me a couple of months ago? That's taking it one further from this clause that Stephen Espinoza's got his knickers in a bunch about. Now, Stephen Espinoza is a guy that I've spoken about previously, and the reason why not the reason why I've spoken about him previously, but every time I've spoken about him previously, I've not had anything positive to say about him. I try and keep it neutral on this channel, which is why you'll find me in certain instances criticizing Dana White, and in other instances praising Dana White. But Stephen Espinoza is a guy that I've never found an opportunity to praise. He's only ever given me reason to criticize him, and this is another one of them reasons. We're talking about a guy who's the what do you call it, like the head sailor, like the fucking driver of he's the driver of a sinking ship, right? He's a guy that was once successful, that had the biggest platform when it came to boxing or boxing coverage. And he's now found him in a position where ESPN have overtaken him. DAZN have come and overtaken him. And all of the fighters and the promoters that he relied on on Showtime are now migrating to Fox Sport. And I've made this point before. This guy, the way he moves on Twitter, the way he kind of carries himself, the way he conducts himself, the way he says things publicly, he just constantly... I'm surprised he's still got toes. Because the amount of time he shot himself in the fucking foot, it's unbelievable. You're a TV executive. Your job is to try to find the best talent available on the market to provide content for your channel. That is your job, to find the best boxers to perform on your channel. And all he's been doing over the last 5-6 years is trying to get himself involved, trying to get himself put into the narrative, be part of the story. And every time he does that, he burns a bridge. And he's painted himself into a corner now where the best fighters that are on the roster, the promotional outfit, PBC, that he thinks he's got to deal with, have all started fighting on Fox, and he's just left with the scraps. So he's got the scraps with PBC, but he's like, on the other hand, he's burnt bridges with other promoters. So he's kind of left in no man's land. It's like his ego's just uncontrollable. Like I've compared him to Adam Smith of Sky Sport Boxing. And I've never seen Adam Smith criticize a rival channel, promoter, or boxer. I've only ever seen him praise these people. Praise BT Sport for the coverage that they're putting together. Praise Tyson Fury for his performance in America. Do you know what I mean? Praise Frank Warren for the history they shared on Sky Sports and the stable that he's got on BT Sport. Like, that's literally all I've seen Adam Smith do. Because he keeps doors open. Because he doesn't know what's around the corner. And you got Stephen Espinoza, who all he fucking does online is bitch and moan. Get your own house in order first. Recognize the fact that the stable that was on Showtime 4 or 5 years ago is not what you currently have. Recognize the fact that you're not putting out the same caliber or the same quality of content that you once were. Stop moaning about what other people are doing. Stop watching what other people are doing. Start doing your job. Like, you can't bitch and moan about other people when you're performing worse than you once were. And you can moan about, oh well, you know, it's an unfair market because of all of the money that's coming. Tough. That's just how the cookie crumbles. If you used your brain and you just kept out of the politics of boxing and just kept a healthy relationship with all of the different promoters out there and all of the different managers out there and all of the different fighters out there, you wouldn't be in this predicament. I'm pretty sure you would have signed other fighters. You would have signed other fighters to your platform. But now you're just sat there fucking with a thumb up your ass. Because all you do is... And the worst thing is, right? This is a man who, like, who's wrong. Like, he'll tweet things that are wrong. Like, if you're going to have a bitch and a moan, and if you're in a position of authority or power, or like you have a following and people take notice of what you're saying, if you're going to moan about someone, or if you're going to criticize someone, you better be right. Because if you're going to do it and be wrong, then it looks bad on you. You're embarrassing yourself at this point. And that's what he's doing. I kind of feel sorry for him, man. It feels like he's a shell of his former self. It feels like he's a defeated man. And he's bitter. He's bitter at other people. And I remember the first time I heard him speak and just kind of his outlook on things when he was successful. He seemed like he was quite a kind of a knowledgeable person and someone that understood the way, the lay of the land, as it were. And it seemed like he had an interesting perspective, an intelligent outlook. But the more things have been taken away from him, and when I say things, the way PBC have moved boxers from his channel over to Fox, the more kind of desperate he's become, it seems like. And the more he embarrasses himself on a regular basis. And I feel sorry for him at this point. But if you're going to pick a fight, if you're going to start a feud, you have to make sure you're right. Because if you're the one who's picking a fight and you're the one that's wrong, then it's embarrassing. Going back to UFC 249, judging by the response of the fighters involved in the card, everybody involved has had positive things to say about the experience they had. I'm interested to hear what Jeremy Stephens has to say, because obviously he didn't make weight, and I don't know whether the change in how things were run on fight week contributed to that. But that's, I mean, I can't, and I might be wrong, and I'd love, if someone has said negative things, I'd love to see it. But in terms of how the UFC managed and structured the logistics of that event, I haven't heard anyone bitch and moan. The only thing, like I said, I've seen is Justin Gaethje saying they didn't even fly us private. We flew commercial. And that was the worst bit of the fight week so far. Apart from that, nobody has had any negative things to say. And contrary to what Stephen Espinoza believes, the fighters are allowed to make negative comments about the UFC and how they feel they've been handled during fight week, as are the fighters on this coming Wednesday's card, and as are the fighters on next Saturday's card. They're all free to make or free to voice their opinions on how they were handled, and if they're negative, so be it. The only thing that the UFC try and stop them from doing is lying, which I think is fair. And I don't know if I mentioned this previously, because this is quite a long video. I didn't mean for it to go on this long. Dana White himself said that this is a clause that we put in all of our contracts. So this isn't anything new. This is something that the fighters sign every time they perform on a UFC card. And I don't blame the UFC. I don't blame them for it. But I can think of a number of occasions where fighters have expressed a negative opinion towards Dana White, towards the UFC, towards how they're being booked, towards how they're being marketed, towards how they're being pushed, towards who they're being asked to fight, towards what card they're being asked to fight on. A number of fighters have expressed negative opinions towards the UFC. It's been happening forever, and it will continue to happen forever. And at this stage, it just feels like it's not in Dana White's makeup to hold these negative statements firmly against a fighter. Like if you're in Dana White's bad books, you can pretty easily come out of those bad books if you're a fighter. I mean, look at Tito Ortiz in the past. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's fighters that can be in his bad books, that can be on his bad side, but still get what they believe they're worth and perform in the UFC octagon. That's actually a good point about Dana White. And all of the stuff that I've criticised him for, like recently, I can only just find things to compliment him about. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going to make a video now criticising him. One of the ones I'm going to make tonight is to do with Stipe Miocic. But this over here, this disparagement clause in this contract that Stephen Espinoza has literally spent all weekend tweeting about. Go on his Twitter, because that's what I was doing at the beginning of the video. I was going on his Twitter and I was trying to find the specific tweet. But I was shocked. Like, literally everything on here is about this clause for the last few days. It's embarrassing, man. It's embarrassing. And side note, this has gone on way too long, way longer than I wanted it to. But side note, like, I made a video about MMA media, talking about certain members of the MMA media getting criticised, and I felt it was unfair. Luke Thomas being one of them, because I feel like Luke Thomas's questioning of UFC running an event during a global pandemic, I believe it came from a genuine place. I don't think he was sat there just trying to be negative for the sake of being negative, but there definitely are some journalists out there, and a couple that work for Bloody Elbow. It just feels like they spend their entire time just trying to find reasons to bash the UFC and bash Dana White, and it's fucking exhausting. It is fucking exhausting. Like, if your life consists of you trying to find reasons to be upset and angry so you can write about it, I feel sorry for you. I genuinely feel sorry for you, because it can be quite a weight on your shoulders being upset and angry all the time just to write stuff. Well, Dana White said this, or Dana White done that. Like, there's this guy called John S. Nash, right? Who, he was one of the guys that was tweeting about this clause. He was a guy that was kind of moaning about this clause, and like, it didn't take me long to go on Google and search disparagement legal term and see, okay, well, it kind of makes sense why the UFC are doing this. And it kind of feels like this is a bigger issue, and I'm going off of the subject, but it kind of feels like some of these journalists, even though they have the common sense and ability to do what I just did, or they deep down might even know that they're being unfair, their whole being is just to criticize and moan about the UFC and moan about Dana White. And it just, like, I don't understand how you can be sad and upset so much and so often and still be happy about your life. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense to me. Just calm down a bit. Chill out, man. Don't always be angry. Not every day pissed off. But yeah, I suppose that has really gone longer than I wanted it to. But sometimes you just got to get shit off your chest, you know? So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys even care about Stephen Espinoza and his tweets. Let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. Please feel free to hit the like button, share this with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already. Go in the description of the video and you will see a load of links for my podcast. So just click on whichever one applies to you. So whichever app you listen to podcasts on, click on that link. You'll go directly to my podcast and subscribe and have a listen and enjoy. I think that's it. I said twice in a row, which 100% means I'm running out of things to say. So I'll catch you guys next time.